Welcome to the CryptoCounsel at Wiley. We are the podcast that decodes the most important crypto disputes in litigation and regulation. I'm Josh Simmons, an international lawyer who does crypto disputes.
And I'm Frank Scaduto, a securities lawyer who also does crypto disputes.
Frank, shall we start with our quick bits?
Yeah, I think I get to do them this time, Josh. This is quite an honor. So
take it away.
All right. I hope I do you proud. All right. 3 quick bits, Josh. So the first, quick bit number 1, hearing news that the Chicago Mercantile Exchange is thinking about allowing spot Bitcoin trading. According to the Financial Times, this operation would be run through a currency trading venue in Switzerland, which has extensive regulations governing trading and storing of crypto assets. Josh, is this the best thing to come out of Switzerland since Roger Federer?
I don't think anything that's come out of Switzerland in the last 50 years can rival Roger Federer, but I'm going to have to say there's probably some chocolate that's going to beat this out.
This is true. Chocolate's excellent. Also, I mean, let's just give some props to Switzerland here, clearly doing something in a way that is clear and allows this whole thing to be set up. So SEC, if you're listening, Switzerland's got some good stuff cooking, apparently.
They have some history with regulating banks, right?
I believe so, Josh. All right, quick bit number 2. A supposed heir of the Cartier luxury goods family, along with Colombian nationals, are all being prosecuted in New York federal court for using cryptocurrency in a major international money laundering and narcotics operation. Could this be the inspiration for a new HBO original series, Josh?
It should be. I think The Sopranos should watch out. When you have Cartier luxury goods, Colombian cartel, and money laundering, what could go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a rap concept album. It checks all the right boxes.
They're just going to need the right lead actor. We'll see what they can do.
Well, Paul Giamatti on Billions, I feel like he would really want to step up and maybe prosecute this in this new series, potentially.
I think he's looking for a crypto project. This is probably the one.
Or, of course, Matt Damon, always available.
Fortune favors the brave.
All right. And Josh, for our last quick bit for the day, we're coming up on the election. It's almost here, a couple months away. And there's a lot of activity now about the candidates and their stances on crypto. We saw Trump speak at the Bitcoin conference back in Nashville. People are asking what Harris is going to be doing to court the crypto industry's vote. So I have to ask Josh, if you were running for office, would you accept crypto? And in particular, what kind?
It depends on when I'm running for office, because you see, I believe in crypto as a long-term store of value. So if the election is, 5-10 years from now, I'm only accepting Dogecoin. But if the election is in a few months, I would prefer US dollars.
Have you not shifted to Dogeverse, Josh? We talked about this.
Not yet. I'm still with Bitcoin.
Okay, you have to make the hyper leap. It's amazing.
I'll look for my opportunity.
All right. Those were our quick bits. I guess we should get into today's lengthier topic, which is smart contracts. And I think I'm about to learn a fair bit because I've been doing contract law for a little while now as a lawyer. Have I just been using dumb contracts the whole time?
You have. They come from the era of pen and ink. But before we get into smart contracts, which is the key question here, you can't understand a smart contract unless you understand the blockchain. And we're the CryptoCounsel. We've been talking about cryptocurrencies in particular, but cryptocurrency and blockchain inseparable. What can you teach us about blockchain, Frank?
Can I give an answer strictly in ones and zeros? Is that a doable thing here?
That's how we're going to do the quick bits in the next episode. So I think we'll have to stick with the English language for now.
Okay, let me give it a whirl here. So blockchain technology, or a blockchain, is a distributed ledger of transactions. It's basically a list of transactions that can be of any type, of a payment, the recording of a piece of information, anything that you could record can be reported on a ledger. And the blockchain ledger is special because it's not centrally managed or run by any entity or individual. It's a distributed ledger, and it is something that no one has control over, but everyone out there in the world who wants to be a part of it can see it, can interface with it, and can have some degree of assurance that what is there on the ledger is true, is what it purports to be.
One thing that's been interesting in reading commentary about this space is the parallels between the growth of the internet age itself, because there was the dot-com era, the bubble that crashed, and now we've had this blockchain and crypto era where there was an initial associated with FTX crash, and now crypto's rallied, just as, say, Amazon.com. Price fell for a while and then came back up and is now one of the strongest performers in the market. So you don't look back at the dot-com era and say all these companies were a flop, because many have become household names. Now we're in the crypto era. How is this blockchain technology a leap forward as compared to, say, the internet technology that changed the world a few decades ago?
Before I answer that, I have to just share an anecdote, which is when I first started practicing law, I had a more senior, I believe he was partner at the time, person who had lived through the dot-com era and its initial crash. And one of his friends had briefly made it, but then became a regular person again, because this person had a website, fighterjets.com. And it was just pictures of fighter jets.
It's a great idea.
That was his idea. That was the internet.
He didn't sell fighter jets?
He just had pictures of fighter jets on fighterjets.com, which for a while was a wildly successful operation. The internet eventually became a more reputable and obvious thing where you could actually transact commerce of some value. But fighterjets.com is always, to me, the thing that I think of when you describe what you just described.
So the internet's gone through its growing pains. Maybe blockchain and crypto are doing that now. How are they a leap forward? What's going to change because of this?
So, I mean, in terms of the analogy or the parallels that you described, the technology is a leap forward in that it is probably the first real innovation that allows decentralized transactions to occur at scale with trust, accuracy, a self-perpetuating system of validation. It is a real innovation. I don't think it necessarily needs to be tied to the internet. Obviously, it uses computers all over the world to do what it does. But just as a concept, it is a huge leap forward, because up until now, a lot of the things that it facilitates required some central authority.
Exactly. And I think that's why cryptocurrencies are easy to wrap your mind around, because they really are the quintessential decentralization of finance. At least that's one element of their operation. Historically, you needed a bank. If you wanted to have a transaction with someone in another country, you'd have to have a currency exchange. You would have to have a process of transmitting that money across borders, and you would run that through a bank. That's the central entity that's controlling the exchange of money in that transaction. Today, with Bitcoin, for example, you don't need the bank. You simply record it on the blockchain. Your Bitcoin goes down. The other person's Bitcoin goes up. Transaction accomplished, no fees, no middleman. But that's just one functionality of the blockchain. People understand it well. It's the one that's come first. But beyond cryptocurrency, the whole idea of a smart contract could have infinite applications, right?
I mean, it sure seems that way. It sure is becoming that way out in the world. And me, the dumb contract user, is learning a lot about these smart contracts, and we're seeing a lot of them. But the thing that I always find weird and have to tell people when we talk about this is they're not really contracts at all.
Contracts 101 from law school. What is a contract?
It's an offer and acceptance, Josh.
Meeting of the minds.
Meeting of the minds.
Why is a smart contract not a contract?
It doesn't really involve a meeting of the minds in the sense of, you write down, I'm going to buy from you a car and you're going to pay me $10,000. It's not a document as such like that. It's more a set of rules, a set of executing code that can govern a relationship depending on how it evolves. So it has features of a contract in that it has terms and things that happen depending on what happens, X, Y, or Z, but it's not a written document as such.
Exactly. So it's not the contract itself, but it can show the contract. It can show the meeting of the minds. But this is where it gets smart, because it doesn't just put the contract in writing. It also can govern the functionality of the contract. And I think that's why people call it smart, because we go from words on a paper that say these are the terms of our deal to code on the blockchain that actually executes the deal. But this is a bit conceptual. People are still experimenting, trying to find the use cases. I think we should find a hypothetical. And in law school, everyone uses widgets for their hypothetical, but we're the CryptoCounsel. We've moved beyond widgets. Frank, tell us a hypothetical to help us understand what is a smart contract.
All right, suppose you're a company, a cryptocurrency mining company. You need a Bitcoin miner. You need the hardware to do your thing. So, I mean, perhaps you possess the ability to build it yourself. I don't know. But let's say you want a contract to buy one from the newest, greatest company out there offering a Bitcoin miner. And it's a really expensive thing. You find this company, you're in Texas, a Bitcoin mining operation who's doing great there. You find a company in Europe who is selling these things. They're sourcing the parts from China. They're assembling it in Europe, let's say maybe in Germany, for example, and then they're going to ship it to you involving, boats, trains, automobiles, all sorts of things to get it to you at your mining facility in Texas. And so in this hypothetical, to try to illustrate a smart contract, you are going to do that whole transaction using a smart contract on the blockchain.
So we're not just talking about ink on a piece of paper. Now we have code that incorporates the terms of that smart contract. How can the code make performance of this shipment, delivery, payment for the Bitcoin miner? How does that make the process smart?
So let's just try to work through the example in a little more steps here. So you're going to place the order. You're going to place it, let's say, over the internet somehow and use this smart contract to do it. And it's then going to be, the money's going to change hands using the smart contract. It's going to be self-executing. And then it's going to be shipped to you pursuant to the smart contract rules. And then it's going to go on its merry way. But all is not necessarily well. Let's say the product is delayed. You expected it by 10 days from when you ordered it. On the 11th, 12th day, you're like, where's my Bitcoin miner, Josh? What happens then? How does the smart contract deal with that?
There are all kinds of problems that can delay shipments. It could have been a storm across the Atlantic. It could have been delayed shipment by the seller. But these contractual parties are sophisticated crypto industry professionals, and they've put the answer on the blockchain. They don't need to hire lawyers. They don't need to pick up the phone and negotiate an extra payment or an offset for that delayed shipment. They actually have a code, a program within their smart contract that determines precisely what the difference in payment is going to be because of the late shipment. So here, the smart contract, and you can imagine all kinds of sliding scales and algorithm for delay, for the cause, automatically resolved. No need to go further. The parties have executed their deal. They foresaw this possibility. Delayed shipment, not uncommon. Smart contract saves the day.
So no angry calls to the shipping carrier, no nasty letters, no having to haggle over, if it's another day late, then you got to tack on however much more crypto or whatever form of payment. That all just gets taken care of itself?
If the parties foresaw the problem, that's right. They can put it in a smart contract. They have a program that's going to resolve this difficulty.
It's amazing. All right, so let's keep going with this here. The product, even though it's delayed, makes it to Texas, gets set up in the big Bitcoin mining facility, and they get it plugged in, they hook it up to everything, turn it on, and makes a couple weird noises, some smoke starts coming out, and this thing is just a lemon. What do we do now?
Ooh, lemon Bitcoin miner. They didn't think of that exactly in the smart contract. But this is an international cross-border deal. They did have a dispute resolution clause. So here, the smart contract can't solve everything. Parties can't foresee every possible contingency of what could go wrong. And here, with the Bitcoin miner not functioning, there could be claims of lost profits and other damages because of this defective Bitcoin mining hardware. And so the parties are going to have to go to the dispute resolution clause, which is in the smart contract.
So, I mean, they're going to court.
No, they wouldn't go to court. And here's why. So this is a new facet, but it's an old aspect of cross-border transactions and disputes, because if there's a dispute between parties from different countries, going to court has a problem. One, there could be home court advantage, questions of jurisdiction, but more importantly, even if a party wins a judgment, it's very difficult to take a judgment from a court across borders and enforce it. And this is why international arbitration is a de facto monopoly for cross-border disputes. And the reason for that is because of a multilateral treaty known as the New York Convention. And under the New York Convention, in most countries of the world, you can take an arbitration award and enforce it in another country. So it doesn't have the problem that a court judgment has in terms of taking it across borders. And so here, there could be an arbitration clause. The parties would go to arbitration. They would not go to the courts or litigation.
So, I mean, you do a lot more of this arbitration work than I do. I've touched it from time to time, but whereas I go into courtrooms and there's judges at very beautiful, ornate wooden desks with gavels and all sorts of very serious aspects to it all. Arbitration is a little different, right? It's a private mechanism where there are people like judges, but they're sitting in conference rooms of businesses or law firms, and it's a little more informal, would you say?
Yes, that's correct. So that's the traditional form of international arbitration. The parties will appoint one or perhaps three arbitrators who will be effectively the judges, but they are the arbitrators who decide the dispute, issue the binding award that resolves the case and can be enforced under the New York Convention as long as it complies with its terms in multiple jurisdictions. But that's the old school way. And it's quite possible that even in a smart contract about Bitcoin miners in the present day, crypto companies might have that form of traditional dispute resolution. But there's a new innovation here, and it's coming in two different ways. One is closer to the traditional model, which some people are calling off-chain arbitration because it's not on the blockchain. It is going to the arbitrators, but some institutions are trying to put in place new rules specific to smart contracts. And one example is JAMS. They are an alternative dispute resolution institution, and they've put together a new set of rules that are specific to smart contracts. For example, the JAMS rules will have a more accelerated schedule. They might allow the arbitrator to review the underlying code of the smart contract, have experts who can analyze that code, tweak the code, interpret the code, and otherwise be more suited to the smart contract process. Similarly, in the United Kingdom, a jurisdiction task force created the Digital Dispute Resolution Rules, the DDRR, which are a bit more forward-leaning than the JAMS rules, but have the same concept. More particularly adapted to smart contracts, blockchain-type disputes, but they're still typically off-chain. In other words, they have a particular jurisdiction where the arbitration will happen. There will be a process for appointing arbitrators who will decide the dispute.
So that's off-chain arbitration. But I suppose if it goes really well, it could be off-the-chain arbitration, Josh?
Having participated in a number of arbitrations, I haven't yet seen one that's off the chain, but there are now possibilities of on-chain arbitration.
That sounds a little scary. What's on-chain arbitration all about?
On-chain is on the blockchain.
Like inside the blockchain?
Like inside the matrix. That's where the arbitration happens.
By the ones and zeros?
Exactly. but it's a little more complicated than that. This is still new. It's untested, but people are experimenting with ways of doing arbitration, which is private dispute resolution, on the blockchain. And one of the most interesting companies in this space is called Kleros. They have a process where the parties using Ethereum blockchain can agree to have a smart contract resolved through the blockchain. And the way they do it is they call them jurors. So you have a jury. These are stakeholders in the crypto space who will be called upon to resolve a dispute. It can be done anonymously. And here's what's really fascinating. There's an incentive such that if you're one of the jurors, if you side with the majority for the dispute, say the company in Texas that bought the Bitcoin miner, one side says they should be paid $1 million, and the other side says the European company should pay nothing. But 2/3 of the jurors think the Texas company is going to win. If you're among those 2/3, you get paid more as a juror. So you have an incentive to try to find the more just and equitable outcome in this on-chain arbitration.
So, I mean, another way in which this blockchain technology is sort of increasing transparency, reducing bias, creating a technological solution to problems that have existed for a long time in a really innovative way. That's wild.
And it can have a lot of promise, but it has some challenges because one of the fundamental features I talked earlier about the New York Convention is that it is actually an arbitration seated in a country. In other words, it's tethered to a particular country's jurisdiction. On-chain arbitration, unclear whether it's actually tethered to a particular country. It's happening in the blockchain. It's decentralized. And so would that be enforceable under the New York Convention or not? Open question. One of the most interesting decisions in the past few years in this space was an arbitration that it was a landlord-tenant dispute. And in the arbitration provision, the arbitrator, so it had an element of traditional arbitration. An arbitrator is appointed. But the rules in this particular arbitration required the arbitrator to use Kleros blockchain dispute resolution technology, send the issue to these jurors to decide the case, and then that would be the arbitrator's decision. So is that enforceable? Can you take that to a court? In that case, a court in Mexico said yes. This arbitrator had issued an award according to a process that the parties agreed to. They agreed to use Kleros and the jury process. They got a final award. The arbitrator effectively rubber stamped that award saying, yes, we've now done what the parties said we would do to resolve this dispute. They had to go to Mexican court to enforce that award, and the Mexican court said, yes, this is an enforceable arbitration award.
Have you been seeing any U.S. courts faced with the ask of approving a smart contract on the chain arbitration award?
I think this remains unprecedented in the U.S. courts. It will be really interesting to see, though, because the U.S. has a very favorable pro-arbitration legal system. And there's every reason to think that if you can check the boxes of the New York Convention, whether you have an arbitrator and a seat, if you want to go through Kleros and you have those other elements, it's hard to see why a court would necessarily deny enforcement of a award because you're doing it on the chain.
And is there any discovery as part of this on-the-chain process?
The beauty of the process is that the parties get to decide. And so let's go back to the hypothetical with the delayed shipment or the defective Bitcoin miners. Perhaps the parties had it in their contract already, in their smart contract, that all documents would be uploaded automatically.
Wow.
And then those documents would be automatically revealed to the jurors decided in this case who are going to be paid to vote one way or the other. Really interesting questions about that. But in arbitration, unlike litigation, the parties have control. So they could decide either in advance or during the process whether and to what extent there would be discovery.
I know you mentioned JAMS, which obviously is a very big arbitration firm that many of us use. Are they beginning to experiment with this on-chain arbitration stuff?
Well, their process, it's interesting because they seem to be trying to convey a sense of competence and awareness of the smart contracts, but ultimately their rules are traditional. They're different proceedings that follow all the hallmarks of a classic arbitration process. They're not on the chain. They require an arbitrator. They go through the process in a normal way. So the parties might want that. There can be some appeal to it. I don't think they've been used a lot yet. I think in some ways it's a step toward the futuristic on-chain technology for dispute resolution, but the rules themselves are in a traditional way.
And in our hypothetical, we talked about a transaction that was entirely on the blockchain, from point of sale to payment to shipment to dealing with a dispute. Are there opportunities for companies to use only pieces of that? For example, I'm thinking of the smart contract dispute resolution. I could see a lot of clients who say, well, I'm going to do it the traditional way for payment and shipping, but I really like this dispute resolution feature. Is that doable?
Absolutely. So you could have a pen and ink contract or a standard invoice, and the dispute resolution clause could say, we want this dispute resolved on the blockchain through Kleros. The dispute could happen very efficiently, very effectively, particularly if the parties have cryptocurrency available for operating the transaction or the payment at the end of the day. So yes, it's completely flexible, and that's one of the beauties of arbitration.
So, I mean, I like you, Josh. I want to see more of you. Are you going to be out of a job with these smart contract dispute resolution mechanisms?
It's going to take a long time before we get there with the technology. And a similar question has come up with artificial intelligence. Is AI going to take the place of judges and lawyers? There's something that it can't do yet, and there's something that the blockchain can't do, and that's exercise judgment. And that's what parties in sophisticated, particularly cross-border business transactions want. They want good judgment, fair process from the decision makers. And I think we're a long way away from a smart contract, blockchain technology, artificial intelligence replacing judgment. So not anytime soon. But I will say this. Sitting here today, looking at Kleros' posted statistics, they say that they have paid their jury members 401 Ether so far. I ran the numbers. Ether is almost $4,000 today. That's about $1.5 million paid to jury members of Kleros on-chain arbitration. So that could be a future undertaking.
It's really amazing. So I think it's time for us to show our good judgment as attorneys and podcasters to maybe wrap up this episode about smart contracts. Any final words for our listeners before the CryptoCounsel at Wiley signs off?
This technology holds great promise. Smart contracts, on-chain, dispute resolution, but it's complicated. And I think companies need good counsel when they're considering how to prepare in advance for this kind of dispute resolution, particularly for cross-border deals. And they should think about, is this an appropriate transaction to incorporate some of these new features of dispute resolution or not? Because ultimately what parties want is fair and effective dispute resolution, and that's what we can help provide.
There you have it. We are the CryptoCounsel at Wiley, and thank you for listening.